I really hope we get some answers soon, but let's break down the game quickly. To me, this game was a harsh reality check for the Raiders. After 2 weeks of beating teams that weren't in great shape, like the Jacksonville Jaguars with their backup quarterback and the Saints without theirs, it was clear the competition level was about to rise. Facing a playoff team like the LA Chargers, the Raiders should have known it would be a different challenge. There was definitely motivation on the Raiders' side. They had a chance to go on a 3-game winning streak, which would have helped Antonio Pierce's case to stay as head coach. Plus, winning this game could have made life a lot harder for the Chargers heading into the playoffs. If the Raiders had pulled off the win, they could have forced the Chargers into a much tougher matchup in the postseason against the Baltimore Ravens, rather than facing the Houston Texans. From that perspective, the stakes were high, but unfortunately, the Raiders couldn't come through. The 2024 NFL regular season has come to an end for the Las Vegas Raiders, and unfortunately, they finished with a disappointing 4-13 record. After winning 2 games in a row, the Raiders faced off against the Los Angeles Chargers at Allegiant Stadium, but came up short, losing 34-20. This loss wrapped up their regular season, and it was a tough one. The Raiders ended with a 0-6 record in the AFC West, marking the first time they've gone winless in the division since the 2006 season, when they finished 2-4. That year, they ended up with the number 1 overall pick in the draft and had head coach Art Shell, who was let go after just 1 season. So it's clear things aren't looking great for Antonio Pierce as the head coach. After the game, he had a short but tense post-game press conference. There was a lot of talk and speculation about his future, and I want to share my thoughts and reaction to some of the key moments from that press conference. Antonio Pierce responded confidently when asked about working with his team this season, saying, "I work with whatever 53 guys I get. It is what it is." Nobody feels sorry for the hand you're dealt. Despite the team's struggles and numerous injuries, Pierce emphasized that they stayed competitive throughout the year. When asked how close he thought the team was to becoming a top contender, he acknowledged that there were clear areas that needed improvement. Then, when questioned about whether he deserved another chance to be the head coach, he gave a brief, "no comment," making it clear he wasn't going to address his future at that moment. In the interview, Pierce was also asked if he felt he had the right resources heading into the season. He didn't go into much detail, but made it clear that he worked with the players he had. He pointed out that no one gets special treatment for a difficult situation, implying that while he might not have had the best roster, he made do with what was available. I can't really blame him for feeling that way. This season was tough, especially with all the injuries, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. A lot of things just didn't go right. The Raiders' struggles this season can be traced back to a couple of key issues. For the most part, the team didn't get consistent quarterback play, and the offensive coordinator's performance was far from ideal. It's one of those situations where it is what it is, but those were major problems. One of the most interesting parts of Antonio Pierce's press conference came when he was asked about the team's performance after facing a playoff-bound team like the Chargers. He was asked how close he thought the Raiders were to becoming a playoff team themselves. His response was a bit vague but telling. He said, "I think there's definitely a glaring need." Now, while he didn't specifically name the problem, it seemed like he was hinting at the quarterback situation. To me, when you say there's a glaring need, it's hard not to think of the quarterback position. What do you all think? Let me know in the comments. Finally, the last question was about whether Antonio Pierce felt he deserved to come back next season. His answer? A quick no comment. After that, he cut the press conference short and walked out, his shortest one yet, lasting less than 2 minutes. It was a tense moment, to say the least. From what I saw, it definitely seemed like Antonio Pierce was feeling the pressure during that press conference. His body language said a lot. He was moving around a lot, awkwardly smiling, and seemed a little tense throughout. His answers, especially the no-comment responses, gave off the impression that he wasn't ready to dive into certain topics. That last question in particular seemed like a perfect opportunity for him to make his case, talk about how hard the team fought this season and how they kept pushing until the very end. But instead of addressing it, he just brushed it off and walked out. It left me wondering, does Antonio Pierce know something we don't? Does he already suspect that his time as head coach of the Raiders is running out? Tomorrow is Black Monday, the traditional day when NFL teams make coaching changes, so we could find out soon what the Raiders are planning for their future. Personally, whether the Raiders decide to keep Pierce or move on, I hope we get some clarity tomorrow. We've got a lot of work ahead of us this offseason. If a coaching change is coming, that's going to mean a complete overhaul. We'll need a new head coach, a fresh coaching staff, and probably a new offensive coordinator. Plus, with Patrick Graham likely leaving as well, it could be a big shakeup for the entire team. The Raiders are facing a lot of changes, and there's a lot to be done. You could have made the case that the Raiders had the edge going into this game, but the reality is, we were completely dominated in all areas. The Los Angeles Chargers controlled the game from start to finish. They owned the time of possession, running nearly double the number of plays and spending twice as much time on the field. That showed in their ability to establish the run and keep the Raiders' defense on the field. By the end of the game, the Chargers had scored on 7 straight drives. Justin Herbert was nearly perfect, going 28 of 36 for 346 yards, with 2 touchdowns and no interceptions. It was clear. The Chargers were a much better team. For many fans, the excitement over the Raiders' recent wins against weaker teams like the Jacksonville Jaguars seemed to create some false hope. While it's always nice to get a victory, I wasn't impressed with beating a bad Jaguars team. This game against the Chargers, however, was a perfect reality check. When you face a playoff-caliber team late in the season, the difference in talent and execution is obvious. This loss shows just how much work the Raiders have ahead of them in 2025. With today's defeat, plus the New York Jets win, the Raiders are now set to pick 6th overall in the upcoming NFL draft. It's not a terrible spot, especially compared to where we could have been, but there's still a lot to fix. Before the game, the Raiders were sitting at the number 8 spot in the draft. If they'd won, there was a chance they could have dropped to the 10th pick, which would have been really disappointing. So, landing at number 6 isn't terrible, but after enduring such a rough season, it's tough to not be in the top 3 picks. The reality is, this was a bad season to be a bad team. There were just so many other teams that struggled this year too, so the draft positioning isn't as great as we might have hoped. Still, it's going to be an interesting offseason, and it'll be fascinating to see how the draft board shakes out. Right now, the Tennessee Titans hold the number 1 overall pick, and they're a team that definitely needs a quarterback. There's a good chance they'll select either Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders with that pick. At number 2, the Cleveland Browns also have a decision to make. Even though they have Deshaun Watson, I wouldn't be surprised if they decided to cut their losses with him and look for a new quarterback, understanding that he's not the future. The New York Giants are also desperate for a quarterback, so in the top 5, we could easily see 3 quarterbacks come off the board. Teams like New England and Jacksonville are also in the mix for talent, making it a very interesting draft. I don't think New England is going to be looking for a quarterback, but with Jacksonville, you never know. They're in the middle of a coaching change, and they could go in any direction when it comes to their quarterback situation. That means for the Raiders, sitting at number 6, it will be tough to grab one of the top quarterbacks unless they decide to trade up, but we'll just have to wait and see how it all plays out. Another big factor this offseason is the Tom Brady effect. As a minority owner of the team, Brady is expected to have a significant say in football operations, especially when it comes to selecting a quarterback. The big question is how much power will he actually have? Will he be influencing decisions as the de facto GM, or will he work alongside the current front office? There are a lot of moving parts, and this offseason is going to be a wild one for the Raiders. It's clear that the team has some very important decisions to make, and I'm hoping we get some answers soon. Hopefully, even by tomorrow. Based on everything we're seeing, though, it seems like Antonio Pierce's time as head coach is coming to an end. Looks like it's going to be a one and done for him. But Raider Nation, I want to hear from you. Do you think Antonio Pierce is done as the Raiders head coach? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And for anyone new to the channel who loves Raiders content, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. There's going to be a lot of news coming out, so stay tuned. With that said, Raider Nation, that's it for today's video. I'll catch you in the next one.